Upon going southeast of Quincy and towards the Warwick homestead, we can come across a curious-looking wreck, a ship called the F.M.S. Northern Star. It appears to be the remnants of a freighter that must have washed ashore sometime in the last 2 centuries or so. It must have been here for quite a while, as the terrain around it has long since adjusted to its overwhelming presence. It becomes clear to us that this ship will, beyond a doubt, never be seaworthy again. We see shipping crates and containers bursting from the rusted holes of what was once the ship's hull, filled with mirelurks. Curious, we proceed through the twisted metal and ancient wreckage to the interior of the hold. Among deteriorating industrial debris and collapsing generators, complicating our passage, we see several partially submerged skeletons in the sand, almost as if they were buried with intent and purpose. Not like the skeletons we see normally in the Commonwealth. A curious sight, which I have a theory about, and will explain later. Hopping from crate to crate and soaking up a considerable amount of radiation, as well as dodging mirelurks, submerged is the corpse of a settler, face down in the water, possibly having died of exposure, exploring the ruin we now are. This can be explained due to the presence of a decayed nuclear reactor. Up the stairs from the crates, we can proceed to the main flotilla of the ship, and to the topside, where we can see the rest of what remains of the crew. This all seems like very casual dungeon looting, until we realize something peculiar. These raiders aren't speaking English, not the deep Boston accent we're used to. They're speaking a completely different language, a sort of German-sounding language, very foreign to English speakers. This sounds foreign because this isn't English, but Norwegian instead. Curious, we can translate this phrases to get better understanding of the true meaning of these foreigners, why they're here.
Vad vill du ha fra oss? Du vill dö för detta. Du vill angripa oss. Du dräpte ham. Jämdera. Du bor icke vara här. Jag kommer... Det är för våld. Från våra skip. La oss vara I fred.
But that doesn't make sense. What's a crew of ghoulified Norwegian sailors doing in Boston? Realize why these men are so far from home, and why they are all ghouls. I believe that just before the war, this cargo ship came from Norway, likely carrying common Scandinavian exports, possibly fish and lumber. The atomic blast and subsequent electromagnetic pulse, EMP, may have damaged their navigational array and their onboard nuclear reactor beneath. Adrift, the current pushed their vessel into where it is now and will continue to lie, along the peninsula near the Warwick homestead. Their now unstable reactor below, emitting high levels of radiation. Those who possess the genetic traits for ghoulification, as we know, changed over. Those unlucky, perhaps lucky crewmen who didn't, died from radiation exposure, explaining the skeletons we see buried beneath the ship's hull by their fellow crewmen. Their reactor still emitting high levels of radiation, killing lost travelers like our friend face down in the sand. As for the lack of feral ghouls, we don't know. We cannot initiate in conversation with these men. I myself theorize that the non-feral crewmen euthanized them out of mercy, buried below in the hold, now a makeshift graveyard. Those who were left, unable to communicate with the people of the Commonwealth, stayed isolated from the rest of the world, an impossible distance from home in Norway. Scavengers, gunners, and wildlife attacking them for decades. Phrases such as "leave us alone" and "get off our ship" contributing to this theory that they are only acting in what they see as self-defense. They only want to be left alone. They don't seem to venture from their vessel at all. So I think they are only raiders in appearance, with makeshift guns, armor, and fortifications as we see in traditional raider holdouts. The only named raider boss is Rags, who may have at one point been the captain of the vessel. This is an unsupported theory. Rags lives in a shack at the very front of the ship, where we can find Tales of a Junktown Jerky Vendor, number 8, and we can find the agility bobblehead at the very front of the ship. Survivors of a voyage never completed, trapped in a scary foreign world where they cannot communicate, only speaking feudal words of Norwegian. There are 2 terminals on the vessel, sadly void of any lore, and only written in English, surprisingly. containing only the controls for the turrets and spotlights. This tragic story reminds me of Captain Zhao in the Yangtze. Video for another time. These men truly are far from home.